Greetings, my fellow freaks and weirdos. I'm Tom, and welcome to Monster Gab, where we love to talk about classic and vintage horror. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Zoltan, Hound of Dracula, released in 1977, though some may know this film simply as Dracula's dog. I'm not sure about you guys, but I don't ever recall Dracula owning a dog. I mean, he could turn into one, so I guess the idea is not that ridiculous. But when I saw the title of this film and its concept, a vampire dog, I simply couldn't resist checking it out. I mean, it sounded so bad. Maybe it fits into that very special category where it's so bad it's good. Well, I'm here to share my thoughts with you in this review. The movie was directed by Albert Band and stars the likes of Michael Pataki, Jose Ferrer, Reggie Nolder and Jan Schutten. So here is the synopsis then. Soviet soldiers are firing explosives in Romania for reasons unexplained, but in the process they uncover a hidden crypt of vampires, the remains of the Dracula family. Zoltan, a vampire dog, is accidentally unleashed and brought back from the dead, as too is his owner, Veit Smith, played by Reggie Nolder, a servant to Count Dracula. With their previous master being dead for centuries, Zoltan and Veit head to America to find the last remaining descendant of the Dracula family, Michael Drake, played by Michael Pataki, who himself has just planned to take his family, as well as their 2 dogs and their new litter of puppies, on vacation. Meanwhile, Detective Inspector Bronco, played by Jose Ferrer, who also just happens to be a vampire expert, is on the case. But can he get to Michael Drake and his family before Zoltan and Veit? Especially as Zoltan is turning other dogs into a pack of vampires. Who comes up with this stuff? Hey horror fans, this video is sponsored by Zealous Rebellious Clothing, who believe in encouraging self-confidence, self-expression and the pursuit of passions without compromise. Based in North Wales, they use their passion for classic cars, music, film and societal non-conformity to inspire their designs, with hoodies, t-shirts, hats and much more, using only quality materials and prints. Be different, be rebellious. Zealous Rebellious Clothing. Check out their website, Facebook page and other socials, links in the description below. Let's talk about this movie then, and before we tear this movie apart, I just want to start by saying it's not that bad, or at least it's not as bad as I thought it would be. Yes, the concept is weird and the story is awful. Not to mention the script, the dialogue, the screenplay, it's all pretty dreadful. But overall, the film is kind of watchable. I'm not saying this film is great or misunderstood, a hidden gem perhaps, but I'm gonna cut it some slack where it's due. It does have a low-budget B-movie feel to it, which is fine by me. I read somewhere that the Winnebago camper van featured in the movie was the most expensive prop, and though it reeks of straight-to-rental or VHS quality, it did in fact have a cinematic release. With that in mind, I was expecting some cheap, poor, maybe outdated practical effects, but that wasn't the case. There are some on-screen deaths or kills that feature dog bites, and I thought these were executed well. I was anticipating some bad puppetry or some fake-looking dog snouts, but I have to give credit here, it was done well. I only recall one death where the editing techniques were perhaps outdated, like the way it was shot and cut, but overall no complaints from me. Zoltan also has some big chunky fangs which I thought looked quite monstrous. In fact, many of the dogs in this film have these big chunky fangs, but they don't look bad as far as I'm concerned. Again, it was an effect that I thought was done pretty well, and I'm not even sure how they did it or what was used. I even thought the dog that played Zoltan was great on screen. Working with animals in movies is known to be difficult, but I thought all of the shots that featured Zoltan appeared natural. Zoltan is played by a Doberman, I didn't catch his name sadly, but he did a fine job of acting, as did all of the dogs in this movie, and there's quite a few of them. As for the rest of the film, everything's just average. Neither good or bad, and so it's unnoteworthy. The acting is okay. I mean, the dialogue is poor, but the actors do what they can with it. The sets, the locations, the props are fine. The cinematography, the way the movie looks and the way it's shot is nothing to complain about, but then there's nothing really to praise too. It's just alright. The music is kind of interesting. It's very synth-based, which is typical of horror movies back then, and fills me with lots of nostalgia. But the style used here and its melodies has not aged well. I mean, everything that's cheesy about this film is only enhanced by its soundtrack and score. I usually love synth music, and like I said, my nostalgia really appreciates it. But the style here is just very weak and very outdated. The characters are so mundane. The only one really worth mentioning is Vite Smith, played by Reggie Nolder. He's just a creepy old guy who's Zoltan's owner and communicates to him telepathically, which I'm doing to you right now. Besides Zoltan, who is the movie's monster, Vite is just a generic bad guy. Okay, so I did say I'd tear this movie apart, so let's do that. The story is just so incredibly bad, but it also has so many plot holes. It appears that Zoltan and Vite were killed many years ago by a wooden stake through the heart. Very typical vampire lore. Yet, removing these stakes from their corpses is what revives them. I know some people recognise this as vampire lore too, but these bodies have been dead for so long they've actually decomposed. Eventually they would have rotted to dust. At what point during decomposing are vampires unable to be revived, and wouldn't the stake eventually fall out by itself? Zoltan and Vite also live to serve the Dracula bloodline and decide to go and find the last remaining descendant. Why? Why can't they just live as vampires? I mean, when they were revived, what if there weren't any descendants left? What would they do then? Also, why couldn't they just revive the original Dracula? I mean, surely he was right there in the crypt with them. I don't know. Anyway, there is a scene in this film where we see a flashback to, I don't know, the 1800s, I guess, before Zoltan and Vite were turned into servants. We see Dracula about to feed on a sleeping victim when Zoltan barks and wakes her, completely interrupting Dracula's feast. For some reason, Dracula decides to bite the dog and keep him for himself. He also possesses Vite too, because I don't know. Maybe Dracula just really wanted a dog, but he couldn't be bothered looking after him. Maybe Vite was kept as a pooper scooper. But my favourite moment in the film has to be when Detective Inspector Bronco finds Michael Drake and explains to him that he is the descendant of Dracula and the last in line. Now, just let me put this into perspective. This movie is based in the same universe as ours. As in, all of the books and movies about Dracula do exist, and as far as we're all aware, he is a fictional character of horror. Imagine if a guy that you've never met pulled you aside and told you that you are the last remaining descendant of the Dracula family. How would you react? Well, Michael Drake takes about 2 seconds to accept this information and considers it must be true. Even if it was true, how is he the last in line? He has 2 kids. I don't know. Okay, so let's talk about the pros and the cons of this movie. It is kind of hard to give this movie pros and cons because, like I said, it's a very average movie. Everything is kind of down the middle, but I do have a few. We'll start with the pros first, and the first pro for me is the fact that this film has good pacing, in my opinion. Whether you think this film is good or bad, the reality is it's not boring. It's very watchable, like I said earlier, despite the fact that it is a bit cheesy, but it is entertaining and it is paced well. At no point did I find this film boring. There's a very quick kill at the beginning of the film, and yeah, it moves along fairly well. I mentioned earlier about the deaths or the kills and the dog bites, and as far as I'm concerned, they hold up pretty well. Nothing here looks outdated, there's no cheesy practical effects or anything like that. The film could have used more though. I personally don't care for a high death count in my horror movies, providing that the story is good. However, that's not the case in this situation, so yeah, a few more kills wouldn't have gone amiss. The only issue with that is it would have meant more characters, and the characters in this film are not particularly entertaining anyway, but there is one kill in this film where it feels like the character was literally just written in to be killed on screen. He doesn't really have any other purpose in the film. And that says to me that if there were more deaths in this film, there would have been more characters like that. Just useless, pointless, and yeah, so... But sticking with the pros for now though, I was going into some very negative territory there. This film does have a couple of tense moments in it. Nothing major, and it could have used more, but there are a couple of moments. One particular scene is where Michael is stuck in a car, and you know the typical horror trope where the car won't start or something like that anyway, and outside is a pack of dogs and they're barking and snarling and chewing on the car and trying to get in to attack Michael. There's another scene where a couple of characters, I think it's Michael and the detective, are stuck in this shack or bunker. I really don't remember. I don't care either. But that scene was kind of tense too, because again, there was a pack of dogs trying to get into the building and they're barking at the window, or the snouts are peeking through like a hole in the wall and just stuff like that. Nothing that's going to keep you up at night, and again, the film could have used more moments like that. And one final pro for me is the dogs themselves. I actually think they were pretty good on screen. I can't say so much for the characters, but the dogs are okay. They don't seem to be unnatural in any way. As for the cons of this film, the story. The story is stupid, but then the concept is stupid. There are some people that think that the idea is okay, but the story is just not executed well. But honestly, I just think the idea is ridiculous. A vampire dog. Another con for me, the characters are just boring, including Detective Inspector Bronco, which is meant to be the Van Helsing of this movie, just doesn't offer enough in my opinion. Another con for me is the fact that this film is based in modern day, or at least as modern as the film was released in 1977. I think this movie would have benefited more if it was based in the 1800s, and had a lot more to do with the character Dracula too. Oh, no, the biggest con in this, it's just come to me now, the biggest con in this film, I cannot believe I didn't write this down, it's the dog barking. I know I said the dogs on screen were good, but the sound of the dogs barking. Right, so how do I explain this? There is a sound of a dog barking used in this film. It's like an audio file or a sample track. I don't know what the term is, but basically they have this sound of a dog bark and it has a sequence. It's like a pattern. I think it's something like 2 barks, then 3 barks, and then a howl. You know, like ow, 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 ow. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's some kind of, like I said, audio file or sample or a loop. I don't know what the term is, but they use the same one throughout the entire movie. It comes to a point where you recognize the pattern and you know when the howl is going to come in. It's just so ridiculous. Couldn't they have found more audio files rather than just use the same one all the way through? Honestly, it's just all the way through the film and you just hear it over and over again. It's just absolutely ridiculous. It is the biggest con in the film. That and the music. As for rating this film out of 10, I know there's a lot of people out there that would tell you this is a bad film, and I won't argue with those people, but I personally didn't think it was that bad. It was entertaining enough. At no point did I feel like I wanted to switch the film off. But it is very middle of the road, it's very average at best, and so I'm going to give it a very average score, which is 5 out of 10. And maybe I'm being a little bit kind there, but at the same time, I can kind of recommend this film. Despite how bad people will say this film is, it does have its fans. Yet, I'll add that however entertaining I did find this film, I don't see myself watching it again anytime soon. But who knows, you might actually like it, so if you haven't seen it, go and check it out, even if it's for a giggle. Anyway, have you guys seen this film? And if you have, what did you think of it? Please do let me know in the comment section. And if you haven't seen this film, are you willing to check it out now that you've seen this review? Once again, let me know in that comment section. Anyway, that is all we've got time for in this particular episode. Thank you so much for stopping by, and until next time, I don't know who they are, but if you don't subscribe, they will get you. So make sure you are indeed subscribed, click that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new video here on Monster Gab. Like the video if you did indeed like it, and leave that comment down there. Share this with your friends, and thanks for stopping by. Take care, see you soon. Bye bye.